right, guys, at the time of this video release, happy Labor Day in the US. And what we've got here is a 1995 Chevu Suburban K1500 5.7 liter engine, and it has a cranking nose start. All right, I hope we have a good one today with this being a 95. I will explain the significance of that if you aren't already thinking it. But it will affect our troubleshooting. And as one of my viewers a couple years ago commented, and I tried to look it up and I just couldn't find his name, but I really liked his perspective on it. We're not going to troubleshoot the vehicle, we're going to shoot the trouble. Kind of like that. That was clever. And then it reminds me of a comment also just yesterday from Mr. Frigid. And we're going to answer the question on why this car won't start and fix it. But what he likes about the videos is that we question the answer. Even if a car comes in and someone else at a professional shop diagnosed it, we never take that at face value. We always validate that. And we also validate our own diagnostic decisions as well. So as I mentioned, we've got a 1995 here. The significance of that, if you aren't aware, is that it's going to be OBD1. So I will not be able to use my scan tool or the magic box that just tells you what's wrong, as some people call it. Boy, I hate that, man. They obviously never used a scan tool before. But we can't use the scan tool on this because all of my scanner equipment only works on OBD2 or CAN, 1996 and up. But this is a 95, so we do not have that ability. Now I am well aware there is the little trick on the OBD1s where you can take the paper clip and you jump the little terminals in the diagnostic connector and you look for the flashes on the check engine light that will give you a code. You know, to be honest with you, we may go and do that if we really run into a problem finding out what's going on. But given that this is a crank nose start, we're going to go right to my fast tech method, which is probably going to find the issue without the diagnostic codes and probably quicker. Fast tech again is going to be my method that I immediately default to on any cranking nose start or a misfire. And that is the fast tech is an acronym for the components required for the engine to run: fuel, air, spark, timing. Now I have two T's in my fast tech: timing with the cam and crank, that is mechanical engine timing, and timing with the ignition, the actual ignition signal timing. Those can be two different things sometimes. Then exhaust and compression. So we're going to go ahead and try to turn this engine over and see if we can triage our fast tech. Wow. All right, so this vehicle's clearly been in an accident. Yeah, the door catches in the door jamb there. All right, let's take a look. Yeah, it doesn't even try. Okay, so one of the first things we're going to do is I'm going to listen for the fuel pump prime. This is a GM car. This car is going to have a fuel pump prime. So if I turn the key to on, and I'm going to need to turn the fans off in the shop to hear this. Hang on. Oh yeah, you can absolutely hear the whine of the fuel pump, and it sounds healthy. Now that of course doesn't mean fuel is getting to the engine. All right, yeah, you probably won't be able to hear that. Yeah, and it still doesn't start. But you won't be able to hear it, I don't think. But you can absolutely hear a very healthy whine from the fuel pump. So fuel, I'm kind of putting a little bit lower. I'll see if I can amplify that for you guys, but you can hear the fuel pump absolutely works. This car will not start. So that means we are going to now probably triage spark next, but before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my RPM gauge here. Let me get you guys a view. And what I'm going to do is look for a tach signal. Tachometer doesn't even budge. Now that is not definitive on anything, but what I'm fishing for with that is any evidence maybe we could have a cam sensor or crank sensor issue, because that's where the RPM signal is derived from, and not seeing any RPM on that tachometer may give some indication there. Right now it's kind of got my alert lights on just a little bit. But again, a lot of cars, they won't show that on the tach till the engine's running. Other times there just may not be the sensitivity. This is where a scan tool could come in handy. One of the things I often may do is connect up my scan tool, pull up RPM PID, see if the scan tool picks up a couple hundred RPM. Maybe pull up cam and crank sensor counter data, see if I have evidence of the cam and crank sensors functioning. But we don't have any of that right now, so we're just gonna go with our fast tech. I think what we're gonna do is typically, for the videos, when you guys have seen me do this before, if you follow the channel, a lot of times I'll do spark first on my fast tech method. And quite honestly, just a little secret out of the bag, that's because it's kind of cool for the camera. That's not how I really do it in real life. In real life, almost always the easiest thing is to check for fuel. I do not believe this is going to be a fuel problem, but we'll go ahead and check for fuel first anyway to show that, but we will then check for spark. This is most likely going to be a spark problem. One reason I'm ruling out other things, when you crank the engine, you can hear the compression sounds very healthy and even. Again, that's not definitive, that's very subjective, but it's moving compression near the end of the list. Very well could be a timing problem, but this engine does not even attempt to start in the least. It would have to have a very significant timing problem in order for it to not even try. Again, not definitive, but it's just moving my triage down so I can go through my fast tech in a logical order. And right now the most logical order would be spark, but we're gonna go ahead and do fuel first, just simply because typically what I'll do on a cranking no start, I'll pop the hood, I'll open the throttle body up or get to a vacuum line, spray some starter fluid in there, see if the engine starts. If it does, it's a fuel problem. If not, then it is something else or a fuel problem and something else. You can always have more than one fast tech component. Let's get the hood open and let's try this. Okay, you gotta be kidding. This car has definitely been in some kind of an accident. Not sure if that's related to our issue. That hood release is released. Just won't. Oh man, I don't think I can reach in there. Sometimes I can. This car's already starting to get on my nerves. There we go. Okay. And it uses hood shocks, and the hood shocks are missing. For God's sakes. All right, it's gonna be one of those days. I'm gonna set my screwdriver here so it doesn't lock on me again. All right, so one of my little tricks, this is a curtain rod right here, an adjustable curtain rod. And I'll use this for this type of instance. This hood is really heavy. There is a definite safety concern here as I'm leaning over the engine if the hood falls. So really want to make this secure. And the other nice thing about this adjustable curtain rod, I'll also use this if I need to depress the brake pedal and maybe check the brake lights or something when I'm working by myself. You put this between the steering wheel and the brake pedal, you can adjust it. This is an absolute must-have tool. Okay, so first thing, fast tech, fuel. We're gonna check fuel real quick. Boy, this is, I'm guessing this is gonna be throttle body injected. I haven't seen a pre-96 car for a while. Yeah, throttle body injection. So we basically got, it looks like a carburetor, and there's two fuel injectors. My first Trans Am had throttle body injection. All right, we're just gonna shoot some starter fluid in there, try to start this car. And it won't start, I'm pretty sure. All right, didn't make a single bit of difference. So we know we have no spark. So in order to check that, what I want to do is come over here, and because I'm by myself, I'm going to make a remote start out of the relay. There's no starter relay here. All right, let's go look elsewhere. All right, it's going to be one of those days. There doesn't appear to be. Now, a lot of newer cars don't have starter relays because it's all controlled through the PCM. This car won't have that. So either there's no starter relay, or this is still that old design where it's just power side switch directly from ignition. I'm going to go pull a wire diagram just to check that. Wow, you just can't make this up. This is absolutely positive side switched directly from the ignition. Unfreaking real. All right, so to check spark, we've got an ignition coil right here. Just taking the plug wire off the coil. Now I'm going to need somebody to start this car for me. Or it may be just quicker if I go under the car and wire up a remote starter directly to the starter motor solenoid. We want to be really careful and think safety here. We've had, you won't notice it on camera, but we've had probably almost 10 minutes pass while I was looking for the relay and pulling the wire diagram, stuff like that. But otherwise, we would have just sprayed starter fluid right into this throttle body, and then we've got this open spark right next to it if there is spark. So you just want to keep that in mind. I'm going to take a grounded test light. We're going to go right to this coil wire right here. And then I've got my remote starter. We've got ignition on. Yeah. No spark at all. Now, another thing we want to do here, remember, we're scientists here. We want to question the answer, as our viewer said earlier. So we're going to go directly at the coil. Pretty sure we're not going to have spark here. There is not. We would see it jumping to the test light. This car has no spark. Now, the other thing is we are going to question the answer. It's also possible this car doesn't have fuel either. So I'm going to look down and I can see in the fuel injectors here. Okay, one of the other things we want to do is see, is there injector pulse? And that would be very helpful to know. Okay, we can see there's no injector pulse either. Let's just verify that. We know it's not a fuel pressure thing, I'm sure, because that fuel pump sounds perfect. But let's just check that. All right, I just want to verify 100% I don't have injector pulse. All these wires look the same. So let's see, we're going to back probe just this one here with grounded test light. And oh, there's power there. I just saw it for a second. It's kind of hard to back probe. All the rubber seals and everything are really, really brittle on this. It's hard to get the back probe in. That should do it. And I'm just rigging up a thing here so you guys can see the test light easily. And now the only thing is, am I on the power side or the ground side? And I can't tell. So in order to tell, we're just going to disconnect it. And obviously, if I'm on the ground side, the light will go out and the light stays on. I'm on the power side. We need to go over to this one. Yep, just had it. Man, it's finicky. There it is. Okay, there we go. I think I'm going to go ahead and switch my test light over to power just to make it easier to see. And let's see if we've got control here. Definitely not. No control. Test light coming on verifies we were connected that whole time. So that is very informative here. No fuel, no spark. All right, so once again, as always, every time our fast tech method works. All the time I get comments from people, I did your fast tech method and I ran through every single thing and it didn't find the problem. You did it wrong, is exactly what happened. And I see it all the time. I'll ask them, Well, did you check fuel? Yeah. How did you do it? I heard the fuel pump whine. Okay, well, that's not checking fuel. Did you check the timing? Well, I took a cover off the engine cover on the front and I saw the cam was timed right. That's not checking timing. So it's always, it has to be, it's just science. If your fast tech method doesn't find the problem, you're doing it wrong. Remember, you can also have fuel, but maybe it's not sufficient. Did you check the fuel pressure? We know a couple things. One of them is I was concerned about the crank sensor, if you remember. Now it comes into play why I looked at that tachometer and if we have a bad crank sensor. So what we're gonna do is I kind of want to do a crank sensor bypass. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna give a signal as if the crank sensor would, just to rule out if we've got a problem there. And what that should do is it should cause us to get sparks. So what we're gonna do is, just to save me some time, and I've already got the wire diagram up, I'm gonna get the wire diagram and we're gonna look for the crank sensor wiring. All right guys, my apologies if there's some background noise with the fans, but it is a little bit hot today. I am actually going to get air conditioning installed in my garage now. I am just too old to deal with this. So right here is our distributor, and this is a little goofy looking. We've got a lot of contact points, but what it is it's varying if it's a 6-cylinder or if it's an 8-cylinder. So this one's an 8-cylinder. We've got a big thick wire with NCA. That means no color assigned, and that's going to be our wire that I just took off between the coil and the distributor. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wires out of the distributor. We got a couple of them that go to the coil here. One of these is going to be from a crank sensor. Let's follow this red-black here. Red-black is distributor ref high. That's not what I want. Tan-black is ignition bypass. I don't know what ignition bypass is. Sounds like some kind of anti-theft thing, perhaps, where it bypasses ignition signal so you don't get what if this is an anti-theft thing? Okay, so that's a possibility. I'm gonna have to look up what ignition bypass is. Okay, our next wire is a purple-white. That purple-white goes right to distributor ref high. Wait, the other wire did. No, the other wire goes to distributor ref low, the red and black. I made a mistake there. Okay, neither of those. We've got the white. Okay, so the white wire is going to be our crank position sensor. White wire comes down and that goes to ignition control. Well, wait a minute. So if there's ignition control, okay, pink wire is power for the coil. We got a white wire to the coil now this can't be right. White wire comes out of the coil, goes to tachometer test lead, and then off to the instrument cluster for the RPM. RPM is read off the coil. Okay, so where's my crankshaft position sensor? Let's see. There's got to be crankshaft position sensor into the PCM then. Okay, now wait a minute. There's no crankshaft position sensor on this diagram. Let me just look on the PCM. There's no camshaft or crankshaft position sensor. That's impossible. That is there is something that I do not understand here, or there is an egregious error on this diagram. Without a cam or crank sensor, there's no way the PCM would know the engine position for the timing on the fuel and spark. I've never seen a car without a crankshaft position sensor that I know of. Okay, the only other explanation is that it's all done from the distributor, and basically It only has a camshaft position sensor. All right, I'm gonna look under the car for a crankshaft position sensor. I don't buy this. This is ridiculous. Wow, there is no crankshaft position sensor. All right, guys, I know some of you are reveling in this, especially if you already know that the car doesn't have a crank sensor. One of the things, this is the whole thing with the channel. Remember, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I don't see these all the time, and that's the whole point of the channel, is I have to learn this system exactly the way you would have to if you're a do-it-yourselfer. I don't have that tribal knowledge of already knowing this system, so I have to learn it, and I am definitely learning it the hard way. There is no question. So the only thing is, this has to run off the distributor. I'm not really familiar with this system. I've never seen a car without a crankshaft position sensor. I'm a little bit curious on the ignition bypass. So let's go and research that. All right, let's see. The ignition bypass function allows for support of older GM ignition systems which use this function. Boy, thanks engineers, that's helpful. So the ignition bypass function is a method to allow for vehicles to use the ignition bypass function. Thanks. This type of ignition system has the trigger signal sent directly by the igniter module, which then fires the coil. Okay, now wait a minute. That doesn't make sense to me. To allow the ECU to take control of ignition timing, it will bypass the It will bypass the igniter and send signal to the ECU. Okay, so that's what the bypass, there's two things here going on. Allow the ECU to take control of ignition timing. That would be when the engine's running. Without the ignition bypass enabled, the timing will be controlled only by the igniter module at a fixed value. Okay, I think I see what they're saying. All right, so in retrospect, this diagram probably is right. So let's see, we've got red and black. This is gonna be ref low here. Tan and black, that had some significant function. That's going to be the ignition bypass. What I believe this means is in circumstances where the PCM here needs to control the ignition timing, in those circumstances, this will take over. Yeah, it's not totally clear to me, but basically the ignition bypass is not something that turns off the signal for spark. It is when the PCM is controlling the signal for spark. Otherwise, there's just a default from I'm assuming from the ignition control module, which is probably part of the distributor on this. As a matter of fact, it definitely is with all these wires, there's no question. So distributor has an ignition control module that just sends spark, and then probably, my guess, when the engine is running or depending on other variables like engine temperature, maybe this is only when the engine is cranking, and then once the engine runs, the bypass takes over to adjust the timing. Not totally sure on that, but it's not an anti-theft. So that means there is no way around it, there has to be some type of RPM output from the distributor. And that would be a really good place to locate. What's our next one? Purple and white comes up. Distributor ref high. That, I believe, is going to be our RPM marker. I think. I'm going to put RPM there. It's got to be some kind of output. The white, sorry, I know you guys can't see this, but the white is ignition control. That's going to be, I believe, an output from the PCM. So that would be another thing we can look is we can see, do we have output from the distributor and input from the PCM to the distributor? And then the pink and white go to the coil. Yeah, the only thing that's possible is the purple and white has to be an RPM meter. See how easy that is to access. So I'll show you another little trick I do here. This is called a seam ripper. It's a sewing tool for ripping the thread on seams. This also works really good on wire harness tape and stuff so that I can access better the wiring. I want to try to find that purple and white wire. All right, so what I think the quickest way to do this is going to be is actually to just use my scope. I can kill two birds with one stone. What I've done is I've probed into my purple and white wire. That would be my RPM signal that would be coming out of the distributor. And then I've got my signal coming in to the distributor from the PCM. And of course, the idea is that, well, obviously if there's no RPM signal coming out of the distributor, there won't be any coming in because the PCM wouldn't see it. All right, let's separate these out a little bit. And we've got our red trace is going to be RPM output from the distributor. And the blue trace would be a signal input from the PCM back to the distributor. We can see where we're missing. Probably both. Wow. Oh, my battery's getting weak too. There's nothing there. Let me just recheck my connections real quick. Yeah, battery's getting weak. See just a little noise on the signal output from the distributor. Ah, my battery's dead. But that's all I need to see. We're done. This vehicle needs a distributor, so I'm gonna go get a distributor and we will get this car running. All right guys, just wanted to test this coil off the car. There you can see, we can create spark there. So the coil actually isn't the problem. It's the distributor for sure. We're still gonna replace this coil, but I just wanted to show that we can determine separately that the coil isn't the issue. And here's why that's important. And that is important because on how we will sell this job to the customer and have total satisfaction out of the accessories that come with this versus how pretty much any other shop would approach this and lose a customer most likely, even if they fix it. But before we do that, I was just thinking, and hopefully you guys are screaming at your screens, hey, Matt, you're not done with your 100% certain diagnosis. Couldn't it be that the PCM is bad? Isn't that a possibility? And that is indeed a possibility. Now remember, in the cranking, the PCM really actually isn't used in this. However, what we do need to do is make sure that when the engine's running, that the PCM is able to see the RPM signal and send out message as well. So that's the last thing we need to do to make sure that we didn't have the PCM fried. We know the distributor ICM is fried, that we know. We know the coil works, but there's no way I am putting in a new distributor with the old coil. That's not going to happen. What we really need to do once we determine this PCM is okay, is we need to replace the distributor, which includes the ICM. We need to replace the coil. We also need to replace the plugs and wires. Again, questioning the answer. If the coil is possibly an issue, one reason the coil would fail is because of high resistance in the plugs, the wires, the distributor cap. All the secondary really should be changed, and that's what we're gonna sell, and we're gonna have success doing it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But before I forget, we need to validate that this PCM works. All right, in order to validate that the PCM works, I'm going to go into our output signal here. I'm going to attach that to the scope. And I also know, yes, of course, some people, you're using a oscilloscope. Do-it-yourselfers don't have that. I could easily use a DVOM as well. I'm just using the scope because it's going to make for a better video. You can easily use a DVOM. Now, I believe that this signal is not going to be enough that we'll be able to use a test like that we would see it. But what we're going to do to test the PCM is I'm bypassing the ICM. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in, let me see, because what this should also do is ignite our, well, ignite probably the wrong word. This should activate our fuel injectors. So let me make sure you can see that. So all I'm doing, very, very simple, I'm just going to put my own voltage signal into the RPM input that the distributor would do. We know the distributor cannot do it. The distributor's broken, or the ICM. The distributor can't do it, but I'll bet that I can. So I'm gonna put in an RPM signal right here. Hopefully I don't block you guys. Right there. And you can hear this fires the fuel injectors. If you aren't seeing that, let me zoom in. Okay, hopefully that's showing. But I can activate the fuel injectors. Obviously that means PCM's getting the signal. Okay, same thing as before, but this time we're gonna see a signal out from the PCM on the scope. There's my signal out. Okay, so the PCM, there we go. PCM clearly works. All right, now I can get back to the point I was trying to make earlier, but we know the PCM is good. That means that to fix this car, what I'm gonna recommend is we need plugs, wires, coil the plugs and wires so that the coil is protected, the coil so that we protect the new ICM with the new distributor that I'm also recommending. So essentially pretty much an ignition system, and that's my point. Somebody may bring up, well, wait a minute, how is this any different than a hack who might replace plugs and wires, and that didn't fix it, then they do the coil and that didn't fix it, and then they do the distributor and now it fixes it, and it's no different than what I did, and a hell of a lot quicker probably, except for the trips to the parts store every time. Well, here's the difference, is that I know just putting the distributor in will fix this car. So what I'm gonna recommend is the customer, in order to fix this car, needs a distributor, and the coil is a preventative measure. It's only like 40 bucks, and they're gonna be game with that. Then I'm gonna also tell them, I really recommend, because I suspect the coil is failing, which is causing your distributor failure issue, to protect the coil, we really should do plugs and wires, and I can charge whatever is associated with that. And the customer may or may not go for that, and if they don't go for it, hey, that's on them. And I'll be glad to put another distributor in here a year from now. But at least the car will be leaving here running, they pick up the car, maybe they'll change their mind later. That versus, let's say the shop that says, well, we're gonna put plugs and wires in. So they tell the customer, we're gonna do plugs and wires, it's gonna be $200. They do that, doesn't fix the car. Now they call the customer back. Yeah, well, we did the plugs and wires, now that we did that, we see we need a coil. So the customer says, okay, go ahead, put the coil in. So they put the coil in. Here's another 150 bucks or whatever. Then they call back. They're like, yeah, the car still isn't running. We think it needs a distributor. And then at that point, probably the customer's gonna start thinking, maybe I need to go somewhere else, right? And you lose that customer. Worse what happens is the shop puts in the distributor and the car still doesn't start because they didn't validate the PCM like I did. And it turned out this was a PCM problem. Maybe it's got nothing to do with any of that, and this is a timing problem. They didn't know to check for fuel and spark using Fast Tech. So the whole time they're chasing fuel and spark because that's all they know how to do. This car is gonna get fuel injectors, this car is gonna get maybe a fuel pump, who knows, when the whole time maybe it was timing, we would have known that. But the point is that there's a total difference in my approach to it and the way that appears to a customer. At the very minimum, they know exactly the cause of why the car isn't running and they can make decisions from there, versus looking like you don't know what you're doing because you keep doing this stuff and the car doesn't run. That's the importance of being able to do these diagnostics like that. The presentation for the customer is better. All right, so as it stands right now, I need a distributor, and the folks at O'Reilly's that I work with said that they can't get one in until tomorrow. We've got Labor Day holiday today, so their delivery schedule's off. So we need a distributor, need a coil, and what I'm gonna do tomorrow is I'm going to first just put in the distributor. I'm gonna replace that bad coil, well, not bad coil, the old coil temporarily. We're just gonna put in the distributor, fire up the car, show you that the diagnosis is right, the car needs a distributor because of a bad ICM not sending or receiving signal. Once we confirm that, the video's done, then I'll just replace all those other components off camera for better protection for the customer. So that is our plan. So I will be back for you guys in like a minute. Okay, right now, all we've got is just the distributor in there. Actually, if I was really ambitious, I noticed on the old distributor, the ICM is removable, and I could have just put the new ICM onto here, but honestly, the distributor is a mechanical piece, so it's really clear the ICM would be the issue anyway. Everything else is the same. We're gonna go ahead and crank this right now. And this may not start right away with all the flooding we did, but then again, it has been about a day later. Ah, look at that. Wow, it started right up. All right, perfect. Man, I just cannot describe the satisfaction when you get the car working the first time, which honestly does happen most of the time. It's just science. We knew this would fix the car. We saw the distributor is not putting out an RPM signal. We saw, as a result of that, we don't have spark or fuel. I then put in my own RPM signal, and we saw we had fuel reaction. We didn't have a coil on there, but we saw we had PCM reaction too. We know a new distributor is going to fix it. So it shouldn't be that exciting, I guess, but for some reason it just is. It's just always a thrill when that works. So now I'm going to contact the customer, let them know we've got a running truck, recommend the other things that I think it really needs, and this guy is going to be very, very happy. So, hey, I hope you guys are too. Thanks for watching. Hope you found this fun. We'll see you next time.